Well, hello, my name is Vern Tomke. I am with a website and a ministry called bandofbrothers.care, where I work with men who struggle with sexual compulsions, unmanageable behaviors. Today, I want to share an Old Testament story with you that I think applies to anybody who feels like their life is out of control or they're struggling with something that seems to have a hold on them or seems to be beating them up. And it's an Old Testament story. It's a familiar story, and it's the story of the healing of Naaman the Syrian. And as I read the story recently in my kind of daily reading, I was struck by just how many parallels it had to my own journey of recovery. So hopefully it's helpful for you as well. And let's just take a second and refamiliarize ourselves with the story if you're not familiar with it. You're going to hear about a land called Aram, and just as a point of reference, that would be roughly the present country of Syria. And that was the northern neighbor of Israel, and also a traditional enemy that was often at war with Israel. So also you're going to hear about a disease called leprosy. Now, it's worth noting that leprosy was one of those wasting sort of skin diseases, and it would keep you from having any sort of close social contact with somebody. Think about extreme social distancing here. You were a leper. You were a pariah, an outcast. In fact, in many places, if you were a leper, you needed to loudly announce your disease, lest other people inadvertently came into contact with you. For example, there's a verse in the book of Leviticus which gives this instruction. Anyone with such a defiling disease must wear torn clothes, let their hair be unkempt, cover the lower part of their face, and cry out, "Unclean, unclean." Talk about being kept at arm's length from people. Again, COVID-19 and wearing a mask had nothing on these guys. So, with that bit of a background, let's go to the story it's found in 2 Kings chapter 5. I'm just going to read this short story. The king of Aram had great admiration for Naaman, the commander of his army, because through him the Lord had given Aram great victories. But though Naaman was a mighty warrior, he suffered from leprosy. At this time, Aramean raiders had invaded the land of Israel, and among their captives was a young girl who had been given to Naaman's wife as a maid. One day the girl said to her mistress, "I wish my master would go to see the prophet in Samaria. He would heal him of his leprosy." So Naaman told the king what the young girl from Israel had said. "Go and visit the prophet," the king of Aram told him. "I will send letters of introduction for you to take to the king of Israel." So Naaman started out carrying as gifts 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter to the king of Israel said, "With this letter, I present my servant Naaman. I want you to heal him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes in dismay and said, "Am I God that I can give life and take it away? Why is this man asking me to heal someone from leprosy? I can see that he's just trying to pick a fight with me." But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes in dismay, he sent this message to him. "Why are you so upset? Send Naaman to me, and he will learn that there is a true prophet here in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elisha's house. But Elisha sent a messenger out to him with this message. "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored, and you will be healed of your leprosy." But Naaman became angry and stalked away. I thought he would certainly come out to meet me," he said. "I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of his Lord as God and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus, the Abana, and the Parpar better than any of the rivers of Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed?" So Naaman turned away and went away in rage. But his officers tried to reason with him and said, "Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him when he simply says, 'Go and wash and be cured.'" So Naaman went down to the Jordan River and dipped himself 7 times as the man of God had instructed him. And his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, and he was healed. Now, there's no doubt that Naaman was a great man. He was a wealthy man. Just think of all the sort of goods that he was bringing with him. He was a mighty warrior, and he was someone who had the admiration of the king. All of his greatness, however, all of his wealth and stature was outside of his ability to control his leprosy. Leprosy brought him down to the level of a social outcast. He could not maneuver or control his way to the other side. Now let me just say this. How many of us have found that our addictions have brought us to our knees? Despite perhaps our ability to have control or even great success in many areas of our life, being a great warrior, so to speak, our unmanageable behaviors leave us with little more than the strength of a child. You know, addictions are the great leveler, aren't they? Old, young, poor, rich, educated, uneducated. It all brings us down to the same level of helplessness to change our lives. Question is this: what is your leprosy that brings you to the place of your greatest need and your greatest shame? You know, some of us have experienced, because of our behaviors, perhaps legal or social or relational or financial costs from our addictive behaviors. You know, we find ourselves living in some version of a prison of our own making. You know, we experience the lingering result of our behaviors. And again, we might feel, I have little hope to change the results of my actions. Is this a death sentence? Will I always be like this? Will I never be able to affect real change in my life? But then, like Naaman, we have somebody who whispers hope in our ears. There's a prophet in a nearby country. There's a chance I don't have to live like this. Something rises up in us that says, you know, I will do whatever it takes to be set free from this, even if it means going to the neighboring country of my traditional enemy. But here's the catch. Even though we so desperately desire to be free, the story of Naaman shows that we can't help but trip over our weaknesses and sabotage our best efforts at recovery. So let's walk through what happens to Naaman. When Naaman finally gets through, brings all this great wealth with him, he finally gets through to the prophet Elisha. Naaman runs smack dab into his first roadblock to healing. And again, it's a roadblock of his own making. Listen to what happens. So Naaman went with his horse and chariots and waited at the door of Elisha's house. But Elisha sent out a messenger to him with this message. Now remember, Naaman is the big man on campus. He's the quarterback. He's the guy everybody fawns over. Despite his leprosy, he's still treated with great deference in his home country. So when he arrives at the doorstep of Elisha, first of all, he is made to wait. Now, for how long, we don't know, but we can just see, his irritation begin to simmer. And then it begins to grow. And it grows. And he's waiting at the door for Elisha to come out. And then Elisha humiliates him even further. Elisha doesn't even come out in person. He doesn't show him the proper deference that he's entitled to. He simply sends out one of his servants to pass on a message. Talk about being disrespected. So let me ask you a question here. What is being threatened here in Naaman's life? Well, the answer is pretty obvious. It's Naaman's pride. You make me wait, and then you send out your servant. You don't even come to greet me in person. Don't you know who I am? So the very first roadblock in Naaman's recovery is his well-developed pride. And that's probably the biggest roadblock and the opening doorway that keeps many of us from, moving effectively into a recovery journey, and that is our pride. It's a door. The door into recovery sometimes feels so low. Forget a hobbit's door. It's so low that we literally need to get down on our hands and knees to crawl in through. And so what's necessary is for us to resist that instinctive response of pride and to embrace the humility that's necessary to walk on a journey of recovery. Let me ask you this. In what ways have you felt humiliated by the response of others to your struggle? How has your pride and self-sufficiency been stepped on? You might be thinking, why do I have to go through all these steps? Other people don't seem to have to make these steps. Why do I have to join a group? Why do I need a sponsor? Why do I have to have filters on my computer? Why can't I have a social drink like other people? Why? And as a result, it feels like this is humiliating. Let me say it again. Either we voluntarily stoop and embrace the humility of our recovery, or we face the inevitable and ongoing humiliation that our addictive struggles will lead us towards. The question is this: why is it so hard to present ourselves as broken and flawed lepers to people? Well, obviously, we want people to think well of us. We want to hide our leprosy. We recoil at the idea that people will think less of us because of our struggles. We're afraid that they would reject us if they really knew what we struggle with. So, let me say this. You will have people who respond in broken ways to your broken behavior. And you may want to lash out and lash back at people. You might want to say, well, I'm not the only one that's not perfect. It's like you have struggles as well. It's just that my struggles are out in the open. We may want to defend ourselves we may not want to submit to what feels like a humbling process that we need to walk through, because it might be mixed with the mixed motives of other people who are around us. Sometimes pride, it shows itself as what is called a healthy self-respect. Sure, we want humility, but we want it on our own terms, not something that feels humiliating. So that is a pretty tough thing for all of us to navigate. And it's really Naaman's first struggle. Well, let's go on to his second struggle. We see that he continues to struggle with what's going on. The verse and the passage says this: but Elisha sends a messenger out to him with this message: go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored and you will be healed of your leprosy. But Naaman became angry and stalked away. I thought he would certainly come out to meet me, he said. I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of the Lord God and heal me. See, Naaman had very clear expectations as to how this was supposed to go. And it's those very expectations that present the next obstacle that he had to overcome. Apparently he had a whole idea about what this healing was going to look like. He talks about, I expected Elisha to come out. He was going to wave his hand over me. He was going to call on the name of his God and heal me. He had a very clear picture of what the healing prayer would look like. And this was something that he said, he probably had thought about the whole time he was traveling to Israel, what was hopefully going to happen for him. How many of us, and I would say especially any of us who've been leaders, like to work things out in our own mind. We know how things are supposed to play out. We like to arrange all the pieces on the chessboard to get the desired results. But this is not something that we can control. Even when it comes to our healing and reaching out, we have clear expectations. I want it to happen this way. I want my healing to look like this. I want it to take a certain period of time. You might say, I want it to come in a certain theological package. I don't want to be offended anywhere along the way. Over the years, I can't tell you, I've led groups of four men for over 15 years. I can't tell you how many people have stalked away from a healing environment because it didn't look like they expected. It offended their finely tuned sense of either what was theologically correct or how I should wave my hand or what I should say and how long it should take. And all of these things offend them. They cause them to want to disengage and walk away from the process. Sometimes guys have a very clear sense of how it's supposed to play out. If I do this, for example, will it save my marriage? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. The bottom line is you eventually have to find healing for yourself, not for anybody else. People say, well, how long is this going to take? Can we walk through this? And I know I have a 1-year course. Could we do this in 6 months? Well, how long did it take you to get into this place? How long is this? All of these sort of expectations that people have laid down as tracks in their own mind. And I would say it's those expectations that keep them from fully embracing whatever it is that God wants to do. So there's one last area that Naaman has to face. Listen to what his response is when he thinks about Elisha's command to go wash in the Jordan River. He says this, aren't the rivers of Damascus, the Abana, and the Pharpar better than any of the rivers of Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed? So Naaman turned and went away in a rage. So first he stalks away, now he is in a rage. He's worked himself up into a rage. I mean, Naaman has seen the Jordan River. I've been to the Jordan River. And many times of the year, it's like a dirty, meandering creek, really. It's nothing compared to the great, clean waters of Syria. It's not much to look at. Now, here's what I hear in Naaman's angry objections. He is comparing the Jordan to the great rivers of Syria. And he can't get the striking comparison out in his mind. We struggle with comparison. Comparison is what keeps us from experiencing healing. For example, comparison about our addictions or our struggles. Maybe you're in a mixed group of people who have different struggles and you're going, well, yeah, I might struggle with this, but at least I don't struggle with what that person's struggling with. Or you might even be in a group, I know, for example, guys who work with sexual addictions are often comparing, well, I might be involved in this, but I certainly didn't do that or that other thing. And they like to, by comparison, essentially disqualify themselves. Sometimes it's like, well, I'm obviously way worse than everybody else, because I'm experiencing things that nobody else experiences or struggles with. Or they might be comparing themselves more favorably. Well, I'm not as messed up as these guys or these gals, right? And all of those things keep us from thinking that we're special, that make us think that we're special, and they cause us to disengage from the very thing that would bring healing. When you find yourself comparing yourself and somehow disqualifying yourself from what you need to walk through, you will miss the healing that God has for you. So let's go back and talk about those three things. First area was the area of pride. The second one was expectation. And the third one was comparison. Well, the great thing here is the story has a final redemptive part to it. It's a good ending story. And listen to what it says. So Naaman turned away and went away in a rage. But his officers tried to reason with him and said, "Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him when he says simply, 'Go and wash and be cured.'" So Naaman went down to the Jordan River and dipped himself 7 times, as the man of God had instructed him. And his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, and he was healed. Think about where Naaman's rage would have taken him if he didn't have close friends around him. He would have left and returned to Syria unhealed. You see, the angry voices, the comparing voices, the voices that had caused him to get upset were too loud in his own head. He had all this crazy thinking going on that had messed up his thinking. I know they like to say in AA, it's your own best thinking which has got you into this trouble. Or as another friend of mine said, don't go into your head without adult supervision. Well, fortunately, he had some close friends around him, and they were able to talk him down off a ledge, so to speak. You know, Naaman, your thinking's all messed up. You would have done the hardest thing. Why will you not humble yourself and do what is really a simple thing? Forget about the clean rivers in Syria. We care about you. Don't miss this opportunity. And because Naaman was willing to listen to those people around him, the story has a happy ending. Who are the friends around you that care for you and say things that you might not want to hear, but you need to hear? The end result, it said, his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, or as we often said, smooth as a baby's butt. That was the end result, pure, clean. So the story is really something that spoke to me out of this Old Testament story. And let's just go through those areas. Where's the areas of pride that keep you from experiencing God's best intentions for your life? Second of all, where are your expectations that cause you to miss the new and different thing that God is wanting to do in your life? And finally, what are the comparisons with what is going on elsewhere that cause you to miss out on what God is wanting to do with you right here and right now? I pray that you would have skin as smooth as a baby's butt, that you would experience His healing, that you would listen to those who care around you, and this would be a grace moment for you. God bless you.